My mom, early on in probably the late 70s, early 80s, wrote a couple of articles, free Mandela articles. She got involved very, very early on um, in the effort to free him, and also as a spokesperson for speaking out against apartheid. In fact, when I was 17, somewhere between 17 and 19, she was invited to speak at the United Nations on apartheid, and she got ill and couldn't deliver her speech. Um, and I happened to be in her bedroom the day she was calling someone to let them know that even though she was trying her best to make it, she still was not feeling well. She had checked with her two oldest children to see if they could go in her stead and deliver her 3-minute statement. And so I just all of a sudden blurted out, "I'll do it." And that's how I got my introduction to the world. I spoke to the United Nations in her stead on apartheid. And so she was heavily involved in raising the consciousness and awareness of Mandela's imprisonment. And the family got heavily involved as a result of her leadership. In fact, me and my brother Martin went with her to protest at the South African Embassy in D.C. and we got arrested and spent the night in prison there. And I remember that experience. And then I think the most powerful thing for me is when I finally heard about Mr. Mandela's release from prison. It was in, what year was that? 1990. And I was 27, and he had been in prison all my life, 27 years. And I thought about this man who was imprisoned unjustly so. He has to be angry. He has to be bitter. And I know I was at that time still dealing with my own issues of anger as a result of my father's assassination, my uncle being mysteriously found in his pool, my grandmother getting murdered in church. And I just had a lot of anger inside of me. And I really wanted to see this man. I mean, I was just like, how could somebody be locked up for 27 years and not be really upset? And I remember distinctly my mother saying, she was, at that time she had already attended his victory party in South Africa when he won the presidency. And I remember saying to her, "I want to go to the inauguration." And she said, "Well, baby, it's a little expensive. I don't know if I can, afford to take you," because she obviously had to take staff members. I said, "Well, I'll pay," because by that time I was doing a lot of public speaking. And I decided to take my own money because I wanted to go see this man who had spent 27 years in prison to see if he had any traces of anger. And I literally went and I started listening to his voice, observing him in the interviews, just listening. And I didn't hear any trace of anger and bitterness in him at all. And it was so healing for me to see this in a leader and someone who's getting ready to lead the Free South Africa. Very inspiring. But even before that time period, the King Center got involved with preparing the citizens for the elections so that it would be nonviolent elections. This was all new, and there was probably a lot of resentment and hatred and a little probably bitterness with some of the people who had lived under apartheid. And so the center sent several of its trainers over to South Africa to train some of the poll watchers and to prepare as many people as possible for these elections. They watched the elections to make sure it would be a truly democratic election with no violence, which actually happened. There was no violence. And of course we know he went on to win that victory and became president of South Africa. When he came to Atlanta, she hosted him with a coalition of individuals. One of the purposes was obviously to continue to raise awareness and help to raise money for for the ANC for his future election as president. And I remember him coming here, and it was so exciting. You know, for most people, Dr. King is the hero. But for Bernice A. King, Nelson Mandela was my hero. The same way people felt about my father, I feel about Nelson Mandela, because he was a man who spent, I said again, my entire life in prison and came out with such dignity and capacity to forgive and love, and became such a coalition builder and a peacemaker. And our world needed that at that particular time. You know, their nation needed that. I mean, no one else could lead in that season of transition other than a man who was a peacemaker, and who knew how to exercise diplomacy. And I just had so much respect and admiration for him and his leadership. And so, you know, he's a missed soul. I mean, his presence. I will tell you one other story. I had the wonderful pleasure of being at a reception with him at the White House during the Clinton administration. And I just remember sitting there after I introduced the president, and then the president introduced him. And I just remember sitting there saying, wow, this man, although he doesn't have the kind of rousing voice that my father had when he would speak, his being emitted so much power. And so that 27 years experience really must have been very transformative for him. And it goes back to what Daddy used to always say, unearned suffering is redemptive. And he really helped to redeem the soul of South Africa.